Welcome and thank you all for joining us today to take a look at how the challenges over the last 2 years have impacted our female-led businesses. I'm Sarah Collins and I'm the head of SME for Eastern Region at Barclays Business Banking, and I'll be hosting the panel today. Earlier this year, we launched the Barclays Business Health Pledge, and through this pledge, we're helping businesses to build resilience for the future by running a series of clinics, masterclasses and events. This is one of them, and if there are any other topics that you think we should be covering, then please do reach out to your local business contact. Today, we'll be speaking to women in business to understand the impact of the last couple of years on the founders and their businesses. Before we start, I just wanted to remind you that we've asked our panel to join us today, and the views and opinions they express are their own and do not constitute advice from Barclays. Note that each business is different, and we recommend that you carry out your own independent research before you make any decisions that will impact your business based on today's discussion. Without further delay, let's meet our panel. Thank you all for joining us today and taking the time to speak to our customers and network. So firstly, Polly, over to you, CEO and founder of The Fold. Welcome and thank you for joining us today. Can you introduce yourself to our audience and tell us a little bit about yourself and your business?
Hello, thank you very much for the introduction. My name is Polly McMaster and I founded a business called The Fold, which is a workwear brand. We believe in empowering women to achieve their ambitions and hopefully helping them build a really wonderful, stylish wardrobe that they can go to work in. And I started that business about 10 years ago, having had a previous career in consulting and private equity. So I look forward to sharing some more insights about it today.
Thank you, Polly. And next, moving on to Nicky, Managing Director and Founder of Goringe Accountants. Same question, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and your business?
Hi, Sarah. Thank you for inviting me today. So, yes, I'm the founder of Goringe Accountants. Goringe doesn't rhymes with orange, only word that does. I founded the business 15 years ago. We are a medium-sized accounting practice that has organically grown over the last 15 years, provide all the services that a typical medium firm does. Then a few years later, we launched Goringe Auditors. We also have an audit arm. And most recently, I've launched the succession planning department as well, which focuses upon selling businesses when they're ready to sell. And yeah, that's my brief intro.
Thank you, Nicky. And up next is Rachel, Managing Director of Tiny Box Company. So over to you for your introduction, Rachel.
Hello, thank you for inviting me on here too. I started Tiny Box back in 2007, 2008, because I couldn't find any gift boxes. And since then, we have set up a factory in the UK that we bought out of liquidation. So we make a lot of boxes in the UK. And also set up a trading platform for businesses struggling during the pandemic, and more recently a sustainable activewear brand. So yeah, on to business number 5.
Thank you, Rachel. And lastly, Philip, our only male on the panel today, and Phil is from the Entrepreneurs Network. And so can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you've been supporting female founders?
Absolutely. So I'm the founder of the Entrepreneurs Network. So we're a think tank. So we produce research that we try to convince government to make changes around. And we run something called the Female Founders Forum. It's something we started right at the beginning, and we run that, and we've been running it the whole time with Barclays. So we've done loads of things over the years with that. We've done reports on mentoring. We're the first to kind of uncover the equity funding gap between male and female founders. And more recently, we're kind of building a panel of female entrepreneurs who want to kind of share their thoughts and kind of have a bit of input into government reforms.
Thank you, Philip. and thank you to all of our panel. We'll hear from them all shortly. I just wanted to remind everyone that on your chat function, you can post questions. So if you have got a question for one of our panelists today, please do make sure you're posting it in the chat function, and you can put on there if there's a specific panel member that you'd like the question to be directed to. So please keep those questions coming. But first up, we're going to come back to you, Philip, to provide an overview of the business landscape for female founders and how female founders have fared over the last couple of years.
Sure, thank you, Sarah. And I appreciate a lot of you probably want to hear from entrepreneurs, so I'll try and make this as kind of concise as possible and talk a little bit about some of our recent reports that we've undertaken. So first, kind of giving a bit of a background on where things stand in general. For every female founder, there are 2 male entrepreneurs, so there's still work to be done there. I mean, this is very much a kind of global phenomenon, but we are lagging behind countries like the US, Canada, Spain, the Netherlands, Israel, Australia, Sweden, and Greece. So even though it's a phenomenon that exists in other countries as well, it's something that even if we kind of got to our competitors, it would make a huge difference. And that difference is really significant. It's being kind of calculated to be in the region of 200 billion. So this is not a small issue for the country. It's a massive issue for the country. It could make a huge difference. And I know that people now don't want to talk about COVID, so I'll talk about it briefly and then hopefully kind of move on to more positive things. But we did kind of track businesses during COVID, and female-founded businesses, perhaps unsurprisingly, were impacted worse from the get-go. They were more likely to experience severe disruption and in their ability to operate. I mean, it wasn't profound, but it was a difference, and it was between kind of 21% of businesses versus 18% of male-led businesses. And we have kind of identified 3 main reasons for this. And these have kind of reference to going forward even outside of a pandemic. So the first was a kind of a sectoral thing, with kind of male-led businesses more likely to benefit because more of them are in kind of science and technology firms, whereas female-led businesses on average were less likely to be there and more likely to be in perhaps hospitality and other sectors that were more impacted by the pandemic. The lesson there going forward is potentially elements of STEM in schools and more kind of diversity in terms of sectors that women go into. We've looked into that, and it's quite interesting. There are things like green tech businesses, which female founders are like much more likely to start businesses than in other sectors compared to men. So it isn't all just women doing a certain type or men doing things. Some of the most innovative businesses are female founder led as well. Another reason that there was a difference is culture. So even women who were out earning their husbands take more disproportionate amount of unpaid work in the home. Women spend on average 29 hours a week on housework, whereas men spend just 16. And when the pandemic hit, most obviously children suddenly had to be homeschooled and childcare options evaporated. And because of this inequity within society, this obviously had a big impact on businesses and people running businesses, and females suffered more for that. And then the third reason, kind of coming back to the funding gap, people needed money at this time, and because female founders are less likely to receive equity funding, this is part of the challenge. So by our data, 15% of total equity goes to female founded startups. This is a huge increase in the past, so it's not as though things haven't improved. Things have improved a huge amount. If you look back kind of 10, 15 years, you're looking at something more like 2-3% often. So things have improved, but they've kind of stagnated around that 15% figure. So a lot needs to improve. And I guess coming out of that, looking towards some of the opportunities from what we've kind of all gone through in the last years that none of us want to actually talk about anymore. But things like people took an opportunity to kind of look at their lives and see, am I doing what I want to do? And I think one of the things we'll see and are seeing increasingly are people kind of starting businesses out of passion. They're seeing that actually they didn't want to work in that job for that, that they didn't enjoy all that time, and that's a huge phenomenon that's happening globally. It's happening in the UK as well, and part of that will be kind of female-led business. I'm sure a lot of people here listening to this are in that category of just thinking this has been the kind of kick that people needed to kind of pursue their passion. So I'd kind of leave it there. I mean, I can kind of happy to answer any questions around that, but I'm sure the panel of entrepreneurs have much more kind of practical, useful kind of things as well for people to learn from.
Thank you, Philip. That was really insightful. And I think one of the things that you picked up on there was during the pandemic and the homeschooling that a lot of women needed to do, and a lot of men as well. And Polly, I know that you're a working mum of two. How did you find that balance during the pandemic, and has it changed the way that your work-life balance is impacted now?
I mean, I always find work-life balance is a really tricky one, because I'm not sure that a balance really exists. I mean, fundamentally, if you work full time, you're working 5 days out of 7. So I think for me, one of the most important things that I've always focused on is, I think it really goes back to what Philip was saying about why are you doing what you're doing, and do you really love it? And I do. I really love what I do. And I think that's one of the most wonderful things about being an entrepreneur, is that you've chosen a route, you've chosen to put your passion and your energy behind something. And that's a huge thing that you should never take for granted. And I really try and not take for granted, because although it's a huge amount of hard work, I also feel very privileged to be in a position where I've chosen that career. I've largely chosen the team that I get to work with every day, the surroundings that I'm in. You've had the ability to shape it and form it into something that hopefully you really enjoy and really love. So in a way, I sort of see that you love what you're doing so much, and you also hopefully, love your kids and your home life. And therefore, it's really about getting as much positivity out of all the different aspects of your life as possible, and not necessarily seeing it as a trade-off. There are elements to being an entrepreneur that I would say do make sacrifices on parts of your life. So obviously, I love what I do, as I've just said, but there also, with running your own business, comes a huge amount of responsibility. That means you do have to make different choices in other parts of your life. So, for example, I really didn't take any maternity leave. The business was at a very fledgling stage. I had 2 kids during that time, and it was almost impossible. If I wanted the business to survive, it's not like I could pay to hire someone to cover my role as a founder and CEO of a business. And therefore, it was a question of being back on the email within hours, if not days, of kids being born, and scurrying through those last things while you're in labour. And it sounds horrendous, but actually it's sort of all part of the chaos and the fun of it. And I think if you're going to go into an entrepreneurial life, you've got to embrace those things, because it is sort of chaotic. It's full on. One of our business values in terms of our culture is embrace, pace, progress, and adventure. And I think if you're up for that, you've got to go with the ride and the impact that it has on both your work as well as your home life.
Thank you, Polly. That's incredible. I returned from maternity leave myself in October, so it's after a year off, actually, which comes with its own challenges. But thinking about a couple of hours afterwards answering emails, that's incredible. But it shows the dedication as female founders you all have. So that's amazing. Thank you, Polly. And Nicky, over to you. What's been the highlight of your business journey so far?
Yeah, so probably a couple things stand out. You always get a buzz winning a client. So the ones that you remember is like the first client, or the first client of a particular size, or sometimes it surprises me. Sometimes it surprises me when I win a client I wasn't expecting to win. So, for example, when I was 8 months heavily pregnant, and I thought, who on earth's going to appoint an accountant who's about to drop a baby? And I won, quite a few clients that month. It was fantastic. And can I just echo what Polly said on the work life? If the really successful entrepreneurs, you're doing it because you love it, and so you do put the time in. So you put in just as much time for your work and your home life and everything. And I was exactly the same. forget about having a maternity leave. There was no chance when you're trying to grow a business. That's just crazy. So you've got to find the balance. But then again, you've got the alternative, you're the boss. So if you want to attend every single activity at the school or whatever, you can go there. No one's going to tell you can't take that particular afternoon off. So you can get that balance. But the other highlight is launching my most recent new business. That's been very exciting. That sort of got me into the entrepreneurial buzz all over again. And that I find the thing of growing a business just really exciting, and just getting, speaking to new clients. I just love speaking to the new clients and hearing about all their fabulous businesses, which is what I love so much. And like the latest one, what I'd seen over the last 15 years of servicing the SME market is because there was a clear gap between, there were so many people that were built up fabulous businesses, huge passion, and they were successful businesses, good profits, reasonable revenues, but there's still so stuffiness and prejudice and all sorts of different things in the business sector, that they're, unless you were doing huge amounts of EBITDA and that, there weren't people facilitating those sales when you are ready to exit. So that's what my latest one's all about, is making sure those people have been really successful and built up a fabulous business, whether it's 300k or 5 million turnover, they've got a route to an exit, because so many of them don't realize they can sell because there's nobody helping them at that sort of size level. So just going through the whole building up a business again, I just find so exciting. So those are my highlights, really the growth parts of the journey.
Thank you, Nicky. And it really does highlight, to be a successful entrepreneur, male or female, you need passion for your business, and you need to love what you're doing. So that's incredible. Thank you, Nicky. And Rachel, next, over to you, as Dragon's Den's most successful female entrepreneur to date. What advice can you give our female founders about how to finance their business?
I'm sorry, I'm still getting over Philip's stats. 29 hours a week, average housework. Mine, either my house is really dirty or I'm super fast.
It must be efficiency, I presume. Yeah, no, I mean, that does. I think it's in general. Like, I think it includes things like taking people to school and back from school. So it's not just like cleaning. I think it's other things as well.
Oh, okay,
factored into it.
That's making me feel slightly better.
Yeah, no. Oh, maybe you should start cleaning a business as your next entrepreneurial endeavor. I don't know.
Not a bad idea. Going back to your question, I get asked a lot about female funding, and it's a really tricky one, because the first question I would always say is, where do you want your business to go? Because if you know what your end game is, then you can look at the funding route that's most appropriate to you. But for some reason, most women don't dare to dream big. Because of imposter syndrome and limiting beliefs, people think, oh, well, I could set up my own little lifestyle business. I'd really like it to be big, but I don't think I can really do it. So therefore, they don't necessarily go and ask for the funding that's suitable for them. Whereas if you've got a really clear picture of where you'd like to be in 3 years' time, 5 years' time, how big you'd like to be, the scale of your operation, then you can apply the relevant funding. The obvious one is your own money, if you can do it, because then you've got 100% of your business. Lots of people are slightly more risk averse and think it's safer to go for other people's money. But for some reason, especially on Dragon's Den, they don't make it clear that if you get investors, those investors are there for life, unless you buy them out or somebody else buys them out. People say, oh, well, how long do they get a share of your company for? Forever. So if you're not prepared to share your company forever, or until you've got some kind of exit strategy or you're in a position to buy them out, then it's always best to try and go the loan route, whether that's from a financial institute or whether that's from friends and family. you know, it's often an easier option. If you need big bucks, then obviously the venture capitalists and, you know, private equity, business angels, and then it's having a really clear strategy of what you are able to offer them as a reward, because most VCs, venture capitalists, will be looking for a return within 3 to 5 years. So is your business able to give them that return in that short period? If not, perhaps another route would be more suitable. So there is no one size fits all. But unfortunately, there's still a huge level of prejudice in the funding market. So, for example, a friend of mine was looking for 5 million investment, really stable business, went out to loads of angels, private equity houses through LinkedIn, got very little return, and then phoned me up excitedly and said, Rach, I've sent out loads through my husband's account and I've got loads of response. Same deck, same everything, just different name.
Gosh, that's incredible. I could see all the panelists shaking their heads, and I'm sure everyone that's listening is as well. It's incredible that prejudice still exists. But I do love your mantra to all the female founders on the line. They dare to dream big. I think that's something that we should all definitely take away. As females, sometimes we do kind of put a ceiling in place, which we shouldn't do. We should dare to dream big, and we can achieve all of our ambitions. So that's fantastic advice. And Philip, I think you touched on this earlier when you spoke about the pandemic, but through your work with the Entrepreneurs Network, have you found that female founders have it harder in business? I think it kind of links with Rachel's comments there around some of the prejudices there may be in funding for female-led businesses.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably not for me to have the definitive answer on this, but yeah, I guess there's a sense that things are harder, but I don't think it's necessarily one where it's, you know, should dwell on it to the point of not doing anything. I think that's something that, you know, I guess every panelist, all the panelists would kind of like to get across, is that, you know, you can do it and it's worth trying, even if it can be slightly harder or slightly different in some respects. Yeah, a couple of things here, I suppose, on the diversity question. Yeah, I mean, there's evidence that, you know, venture capitalists will ask different questions to women versus, so for male, it'd be much more kind of positive questions around kind of some like assumptions of growth and how they're going to manage it, versus females-led businesses where it's more kind of questioning whether they're going to grow, and obviously, you know, the worst thing when it's more like personal questions about how they're going to manage their work-life balance, as discussed before, which isn't really quite relevant if you're looking at a high-growth firm. You know, they'll obviously have childcare and such because that's the nature of already at that point for them. Also, questions are sometimes asked towards the kind of the male-led, let's say, CTO in the meeting versus the female-led CEO. So the actual leader of the company isn't kind of addressed with the questions. But I mean, you know, we'd also talked to a lot of female entrepreneurs who've been really successful and, you know, kind of lent into being a female founder and really just kind of, and are kind of pushing back boundaries, I suppose. And I think, you know, there's something to that, to being the people who are kind of making a difference for the next generation as well. And I think that in of itself is probably worthy of having to, you know, probably try a bit harder. On some of the other kind of policy areas, I guess childcare costs is something the government is looking at. The UK has some of the highest childcare costs in the world, and part of that is due to regulation. And so I think that's an area which could make a significant difference, because on the margin, obviously, people are choosing not to start businesses because of that, because it's just incredibly expensive in some areas. And then turning back to kind of Rachel's kind of mentioned role models. I mean, this is really important. It's quite hard to pin down from a policy angle as to how you solve it, but the research suggests that people who kind of work and live in the same neighborhoods as other entrepreneurs are much more likely to become entrepreneurs, just from kind of hearing them in the coffee shops and all these kind of very small things that kind of influence someone's life and the decisions they make. And this research suggests that kind of entrepreneurship isn't wholly a kind of innate thing. It's something that people can be inspired to do. But the most important part of the research is that the effect is stronger in people that are similar to you. So this cuts across gender, across ages, across whether the other person's a parent or whether they from the same educational background or ethnicity. So what you'll see there is a kind of potentially a positive and a negative feedback loop, where if you don't see people like you doing entrepreneurship, starting things, growing things, then you just, it's not even that you are told that it's not for you, it's just something that you know, people are social creatures and they just pick up that it's potentially not for them. So anything that can be done to improve like role models and that sense in which, you know, people, and kind of realistic role models as well, not just, you know, the kind of Elon Musk's or equivalents of this world. It's also people who are, you know, just leading a much better, more fulfilling life by starting a business. So I think that's a really critical point that kind of Rachel touched upon.
Thank you, Philip. And yeah, we, you know, more female and role models and entrepreneurs would be fantastic, and the diversification of the sectors that they're in as well. With, you touched upon it earlier, in the pandemic, lots of female and businesses being in, say retail, and the diversification and the role models will really increase the number of female entrepreneurs that we have. Did any of the other panel members want to touch on that subject?
Yeah, there was something I wanted to mention actually on that, which was the lack of female investors that I came across during the process of raising money. And I think that does have an impact, because let's say, I don't know, 90% plus of the people that I pitched my business to were male. And I've got a product for a female audience, which is a nuanced product about workwear. Although the concept of female workwear being niche, again, sort of constantly astounds me, but there we go. So I do think that as women are, you know, breaking glass ceilings and becoming further into their careers, earning more money, becoming very successful entrepreneurs, they've then got to become investors themselves and support the next generation of female entrepreneurs, because I think that that current massive bias towards men in the investment community is undoubtedly having an effect on the proportion. And it goes back to what Philip just said about people investing in people that look like them. If 90% of the investment community is male or plus that, I don't know what the statistic is, then it's inevitable that that's going to have an effect on the number of female entrepreneurs who are invested in.
It's a great point, Polly. As we've got more female founders, let's invest in the female founders of the future, definitely. And I think our current discussion is really linking to the first question that we've got from our audience, which open to any of the panelists. And what are the barriers that you face to grow your business? And from these barriers, what is the top barrier? I think we've just spoken about funding maybe being one of the barriers, but would one of our panelists like to? Nicky, I can see your...
I'll pitch and just echo Polly's absolutely right. You need female investors, and I'm seeing more and more of those, luckily, but there's still far and few between. For the barriers, investment absolutely is always is a barrier. I think more recently the biggest barrier is recruitment, being able to find the right people, because there is such a huge skill shortage in this country, and that personally, certainly for a services business, that in some of our years has been our biggest barrier. You know, we've literally had to sometimes slow down growth in certain areas because there's just not enough people available. Even if you write a blank check to find the right people, it's not just, they're just not there. And that's across quite a few different sectors. So I personally find that the biggest barrier.
Thank you, Nicky. Does anyone else want to touch on that question from our panel?
I hear what you're saying, Nicky, totally. And it's not just the recruitment, it's the skills gap of those that are available and the massive wage inflation. You know, so where you might have paid somebody, let's say 30 grand in the role when they're exiting, people are expecting 40, 50 for the same role and not necessarily even having the same skills. So you get to a point where you can't compete, and and then how do you fill that role whilst you're trying to find a candidate within any kind of budget that would be reasonable? It's a big problem.
Yeah, I have exactly that same problem when people are trying to be poached. Some people are absolutely critical, and you just have to push the boat and match those things, or try and find something out that's equivalent value to offer. But ultimately, what we inevitably have to do is just keep training more and more people. But unfortunately, we're finding less and less people are being trained, because so much more is being outsourced. And there's nothing wrong with outsourcing, but it just means there's less and less people being trained, or they are getting a certain level. And the professional service business is a terrible area for getting the work-life balance. So like the Big Four will work you to the bone, and so trying to get any qualified auditor is near on impossible, because they're just got 3, 4, 5 years of in the big firms, burnt out. They want to change, they want to go somewhere else. So you've got to have it all levels of the industry, and just improve conditions and everything, so that you don't then, when you have trained people, you don't get the leakage.
It's a great point. I think our younger workforce are looking for more of the work-life balance and those kind of benefits that you can give them, and they will give you that loyalty, won't they? Just a reminder to everyone that is dialed in today to put your questions in the chat function. We've got quite a few more coming through now, so thank you to those that have already posted your questions. And next question again then to any of the panelists, and what advice would you give to your younger self if you had the chance?
Can I answer that?
You can, Rachel, yes.
So without doubt, one of the biggest blockages of imposter syndrome, of lack of belief, is causing so many women to talk themselves out of what they're doing. So if you could tell your younger self to find a problem that is bigger than you and is going to help change society in one way, and it doesn't need to be big, it can be little. So for example, you could be in the train station and seeing lots of people who are cold because there's no tea or coffee. But if you can find you set up a tea van or a coffee shop. So if you can find something that's bigger than you, it helps to take away those self-doubts about you, because it's not about you, it's about solving a bigger problem and you focusing your energy outwards rather than inwards. And it just stops a lot of that negative chatter that we talk ourselves out of.
No, that's a great point, and one that we've spoken about, haven't we? About, as females, we do tend to almost think that we can't do, and we need to dare to dream big, as you've said earlier, Rachel. Polly or Nicky, did you want to?
Yeah, I just had try to be a brief point. I would just say take every opportunity you can. And my younger self, I would wish I was offered twice the opportunity to work in America, and I really wish I had done that. Obviously, it's never too late, still can go and do that. But yeah, just take every opportunity going, because life's short. You need to get whatever experiences you can.
Definitely, that's great advice. You need to dream big and take every opportunity that comes your way. And there's been a comment posted in the chat that, linking back to, I think the funding question has been very topical this afternoon. Not all business people are fortunate enough to have an investor or financer. So some have to bootstrap their entrepreneurial ventures, rely on credit cards or raise capital of their own. Women's businesses are often among these. Have any of our entrepreneurs on the panel this morning experienced that this afternoon?
Well, my business has all been self-funded. if you want to include self-funded, including business loans rather than capital investment, and that is incredibly stressful, especially when you're going through high growth periods, because you just do have it's expensive to grow. So I would say we need to see more of the investment houses being a reflect. I mean, the amount that I see, you go to the website and you see it's a dozen white men on there. There's got to be more diversity there. But also, I think the key thing with the getting the funding, if you do try to go and get funding before you need it, so as early as possible, and always get more than you need as well, because inevitably, especially if you're successful, it will grow super fast. So try and get it's the same with business loans as well. If you're trying to borrow when you desperately need it, it's much harder to get than if actually you've got stacks of money in the bank and everything's going to be. So always try and get those cash flows set up earlier rather than later, whichever route.
Brilliant. That's great advice, I think. Yeah.
I couldn't agree with that more, Nicky, because I did get investment. I got 60,000 for 40% of the business. Didn't have enough belief at the time that my business was worth more. Ran out of money pretty quickly. Had 23,000 on company credit cards. And I just remember going to bed at night, like struggling to breathe, because I was so anxious about how I was going to pay off those credit cards. And one of the investors actually said to me at the outset, whatever timescales you think it's going to take you, double it. And whatever you think it's going to cost to do that, double that as well. And he was spot on. I should have, looked in hindsight at a lot more money and doubled the timescales it was going to take to get there.
And also, I think that's completely spot on. And I absolutely sympathise with those completely stressful moments where you're running out of cash and it's just absolutely the worst feeling and all-consuming and horribly terrifying. And actually, one thing that I wish I'd done sooner was that at the time when we were going into retail, which is what our business is a very cash-hungry business. You've got to invest in stock. It literally sort of feels like it's eating up the cash. So one of the things I wish I'd done was not only raised more money and given myself more time, but also had better financial advice and help in the business sooner. So although I had sort of a part-time bookkeeper and so on that I was working on, I should have hired a really excellent sort of financial controller or a finance director earlier in the business to really support and have better planning across those cash flows and across what we were doing. And I think that would have actually made me far more comfortable with what we were doing, because the planning would have been better, the understanding of the working capital cycle would have been stronger. And then I think I would have probably had more confidence going to investors, even raising more money, because I would have had much more of an understanding and a more detailed and more complete view from the finance perspective. So that would be a big piece of advice I would give, is get really good finance sort of support into the business, even if it's not at an employee. Have that to hand earlier than you think.
Yeah, I mean, just echoing that, we do lots of events with entrepreneurs, obviously kind of male and female. I can't think of one, and kind of talking about household brand names as well, who doesn't regret whatever the terms of their first deal that they did if they raised that way. And also, kind of echoing the point, there is kind of evidence that women will ask for less money when they're raising as well, and that's not something connected to the kind of validity of the business. It's just something societal going on there. So absolutely right that people should be asking for more money in general and better terms. I mean, it's very difficult with the finance industry because most people go to it without knowing anything at all about how to negotiate and whether you can negotiate some of the terms that are being put into some of these deals as well. So it's really about their network and knowing the right people, and I guess ultimately paying for it if you need to as well, because it works out better in the long run.
Some great advice, really, and planning your cash flow in advance and asking for more money than you may think you need. So, and great advice there, thank you. As let's move into a slightly different topic now, and diversity. We're all, and we're here as a panel of females this morning. Questions around: do you have diversity in terms of culture and ethnicity within your team?
Sorry, you're breaking up a little bit, Sarah, but I'm going to assume that you said you were going to me next. So I've always been a strong and angry advocate for fairness and equality in everything. So I've always had the thing that I wanted my firm to reflect the population. So I haven't ever done any specific positive discrimination recruitment. However, I've always made sure that the barriers to recruitment are reduced, so widening the net, offering flexibility, etc. So and also when you're very small, of course it's very hard to get those percentages right when you've only got 3 or 4 people. So obviously now it's getting to 30-35 people. It's much easier to get those percentages right, and I'd say my firm is a reflection of the population now, which is great, but you have to make sure that you show that you are, because it's easier, if I was still even if I was still a firm of 100% women, that's hard getting that first man. And to begin with, I did have mostly women, so getting those more men is now easier. So I've got the reverse way first, but then also getting different ethnicities as well. Again, it's nobody wants to be the first one in a firm, so it's but you need to make sure you are getting those, building the opportunities, trying to look at different places to recruit, etc. So I think it's very, very important, because if you were all exactly the same, you're going to have a very narrow field of views, of just problem solving, of all sorts of things. You need to have, there's so many positives for reflecting it correctly, because you will just be so much more successful. And I'm not the best academic on things, but I know there's loads of academic papers that are showing that the firms with the most diverse boards, and ones that do have equal women or ever else, do perform so much better, because you've got just a larger brain, because you've got so many different experiences in there, and so you will come up with better and better ideas.
Thank you, Nicky, and hopefully my signal is back now. Apologies for the sound breaking up there, but really highlights the importance of diversity, not just female and male, but different cultures as well. And Polly or Rachel, did you have any comments around diversity?
Yeah, we have. I was interested that Nicky said the similar thing about actually being slightly more female heavy. So we're a workwear brand for women. One of our sort of strongest points of our ambition is to empower women, and we are therefore sort of unashamedly feminist in a way. And that is reflected in our workforce. We're a highly female workforce. So in fact, now we're having to work quite hard to try and make sure that we keep and recruit men into the business to create that diversity on gender. But what it does mean is that we do have a wonderfully high proportion of women, obviously through all the managerial roles, all the way up through the board. And so in that sense, I suppose we're creating really sort of empowered, highly professional, very senior women with a lot to offer in the broader industry, which I think is also brilliant to see in creating those role models from within as well. And definitely in terms of ethnic diversity, international diversity. And I think actually that's one thing that I think is a little bit sad that's come out of Brexit. We're a very international team. We've always recruited a lot of international people who've found their way to London because London is such a wonderful melting pot of cultures and international experiences. And we found it now, obviously, it's a lot harder to recruit from that international pool. We're seeing far fewer candidates come over from Europe who might have come over prospectively. And it's not like you can just slot that in from an existing pool of candidates from within the UK at the moment, because there hasn't been the time to generate that pipeline in the same skill sets that you're necessarily looking for. So that's one thing that I'm a bit sad about, and we probably have to try and proactively therefore recruit from other cultures and other markets and sort of, look at a different approach to that if we want to keep that level of international diversity that we currently have and that we really love, because like you say, it brings so much variety into the business and perspective, and it's it's a lovely thing that we currently have, and I hope we can maintain it in the future.
Thank you, Polly. And yeah, interesting that you speak about Brexit there, because that's something we haven't actually discussed on today's panel, but that is one of the impacts that it is having, along with many others on our female led businesses, as well as any business actually in the UK. And there's we've got lots of questions actually, so thank you guys for keep posting them. We may need to follow up on some of them on an email after the call, because I'm not quite sure that we'll get through all of the questions here. But there's an interesting one here. We spoke about expanding your business earlier, and one of our female founders on the call is asking that she's trying to decide between growing the business, but expects that this will mean that the flexibility she has to look after her child and family will reduce. So did you suffer this conundrum to make that jump and expand your business with that kind of concern that it could impact your work-life balance if you did take that leap and dare to dream and expand your business?
I'll just try and do a brief answer. The first thing to say is you've got to be careful what the growth is. Revenue for revenue's sake is not the right thing. You need to be thinking about profit growth, but take off my accountant's hat for the second. But yeah, you do have to make decisions, because every year I have to decide. I sort of basically I do go through the team and think, right, is this going to be a big growth year, or is this going to be a consolidation year? Because huge growth all the time is exhausting. However, the bigger that you get, hopefully you've got a more supportive team, and that then hopefully you've got the right delegation skills and everything, and it shouldn't be a question of sacrificing home life, etc. So I think you have to first of all start the question, why do you want growth? But when you understand that, then it shouldn't be a decision. For me personally, though, it's never really been a question, because I would get bored if I was doing exactly the same thing every year. So I want new clients or new businesses or new directorships and things. It just I would be I before I set my business, I would never have stayed in a role longer than 3 years, because I'd get bored. So I think that's a lot of entrepreneurs are like that as well. They don't want to be doing the same thing every year on year. So the growth drives you, and you get excited about it. But it doesn't have to be an either or question there, personally, I think.
Thank you. I think it comes back to Polly's point earlier. If you love what you're you're doing, then you'll make that balance work, won't you? Which you've all, and I think we'll end with this question actually, and because we've probably only got time for one more question. As I said, we'll put the others together and answer them on a follow-up for those of you on the line. But questions just come through. What is the best thing about running your business? So it would be a nice thing to end with for each of you to answer that question.
I'll go first. If you've ever been to Thorpe Park, it's like that. You can have like the best days when you win that deal, and that's down to you, or you've achieved some major milestone. There is no better buzz. But the downside is you've got to then come back down on the roller coaster. and the lows can be pretty low as well. But yes, you just can't beat those highs of achieving it and knowing you've done it on your own, or that you've created that from nothing.
Yeah, I hope you don't mind me answering this briefly, but yeah, as I run my own company as well, I think exactly that. And I guess once you've done it, you'll know that you can't go back to working for anyone else, I suppose, if it's for you. And I think that's a position that I'm in, and I presume others around the kind of virtual table are in that position as well. There's that kind of, it's not freedom because you'll still have to manage your employees and all of those things, but there is a certain kind of freedom in being able to decide what effectively what you do each day.
My quick answer is it's being in charge of your own destiny. That's the most important thing about it to me.
I would probably say it's a lot to do with the people and the experiences that I've had and continue to have. I think that immense privilege of being able to choose the people that you work with and surround yourself just by extraordinary talent and people who inspire you every day, whether they're the most junior person in the organisation or sort of the chair supporting the board. I think that's just so incredible, and you can learn so much. And sometimes you just think, gosh, I would never have had that experience or met that person if I'd not taken that leap. And it just provides such a rich tapestry of life, and is so much fun. And I think it can create a lot of joy every day.
Thank you, and thank you to all of our panelists today. Some great insights, and as I said, so many questions are coming through on the chat, so I'm sure everyone is really enjoying the event. So thank you to the panel, and thank you to everyone that's dialed in this afternoon. I'm now going to hand over to Joanne Lee, who you'll see has just joined us. Jo is one of our business banking regional managers, and she's also our lead for women in business. She's just going to talk a little bit about how Barclays can support female founders. So over to you, Jo.
Thank you, Sarah. Yes, so my name's Joanne Lee, and I lead on Women in Business for SME at Barclays. I feel there's a lot I've got from today. It's been a really pleasure to be part of this and actually to listen to some really inspirational people, and I feel I need to dream big. I need to go to Thorpe Park, so there's quite a few things I've now got to go and do on the back of this call as well, but a few bits from me just to share before we go. Philip touched upon this earlier, but research suggests that there could be a potential £250 billion boost to the UK economy should women start and scale at the same rate as men, which is quite phenomenal, really. And helping female business owners is just one way Barclays is supporting in our communities. But a couple of things we are doing around supporting female business owners. So we want to set up and support 100,000 businesses over the next 3 years. We also want to provide skills for a next generation of female business owners, and we offer certain things to help around that. So mentoring, one-on-one, business planning, looking at ways in which you can access finance. So there's a dedicated page on our website which shows you the ways in which we can support you and your business. But we also have a network of 27 ambassadors across the UK to support female founders on their business journey and to help them to develop their network. So please feel free after this call to reach out. We'd love to connect with you. So feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn so that we can continue to help and support one another as businesses grow and develop. But also, if you'd like to find out any more information about how Barclays support female founders or the Barclays Health Pledge, we'll send you the link after the call. And we've also had lots of questions, as Sarah said, so we'll follow up on those questions, which has been fantastic to see. Or you can simply search online Barclays Health Pledge and you'll find out lots of information on there too. That leaves me to say thank you for our audience. Thank you to our amazing panel. Sarah, superb. And I just want to say thank you. And we've loved having you. And maybe we have to come back again and do this again, because we've had lots and lots of questions and great comments made. So have a great day. And thank you for joining the Barclays Health Pledge. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.